Now that we've arrived in the month of February, we only have 6 weeks left in the OHL regular season, and then we're at the playoffs. So we're quickly approaching the three-quarter mark of the Ontario Hockey League season, and we're starting to see some changes in the standings in both the East and the West. We have a new team that's appeared in the playoff picture, and we've got some teams right now that are continuing their winning streaks, while a few they're starting to slide a little bit. So we're going to look at the week that was with the OHL Power Rankings for the week of February 5th. And we start off with number 20. It's the Peterborough Petes. They fell one position from last week. The struggles in Peterborough continue. The Petes then went 0-2-1 last week. They're now 3 points behind the Barrie Colts for the final playoff spot. And they have just one win in their last 10 games. So we kind of expected this with the Peterborough Petes with the sell-off they had at the OHL trade deadline. They were holding on to that final playoff spot. But the Barrie Colts in the last week were able to get some points and have started to get some separation now ahead of Peterborough. So that's the one change in the playoff picture in the Ontario Hockey League. For the Petes, this was obvious looking to the future of these players right now, wanting to show what they're capable of going forward. They've got a young core right now, and they seem to be gelling. You're going to have those nights where things get a little out of hand, get away from them, but there are some positives, including Quentin Paget. He looked good in the Pete's overtime loss to Niagara over the weekend. He posted 2 goals on 3 shots. So Paget, don't tell him the season's over. For Peterborough, they do host the Steelheads Thursday night before traveling to Ottawa and Brantford. So another busy weekend for the Maroon and White. At number 19, the Sarnia Sting, they fell one position. Despite their ranking, Sarnia, they had a really good week. They went 3-0, but 2 of those wins were in a shootout. And I treat shootouts like a tie because once you get out of overtime, it becomes a skills competition. So I mark it down as a tie in my formula, which is kind of keeping them back in the power ranking standings. If you want to see Sarnia higher, I'd probably agree with it too. But right now, I do have the Sting at number 19. I think the Sting, if they can keep this up, they will move up the power rankings. They are right now holding on to the final playoff spot in the West. They took it away from the Flint Firebirds with this recent winning streak. So that's the other change when it comes to the playoff picture in the Ontario Hockey League. They're 1 point ahead of Flint as of today, as of recording, but the Firebirds do have 2 games in hand. So Flint has the advantage, but Sarnia right now is starting to look like the better of the 2 teams. This is a young team, so they're going to look to extend their winning streak this week. They're in Owen Sound Wednesday night, and then they host Erie and Guelph. At number 18, it's the Barrie Colts. They fell one spot. Barrie is another team that I think is a little bit lower in the rankings than they should be. They've struggled on the road all season long, but in 3 road games last week, they went 1-0-2. So 4 out of a possible 6 points, and they're now in a playoff spot, as I mentioned. They're 3 points ahead of the Peterborough Petes and 4 points behind the Kingston Frontenacs, who sit 7th in the Eastern Conference standings. So the Barrie Colts looking pretty good this past week. Riley Patterson, of course, named Rookie of the Month for the month of January. Well, Cole Baudouin, he's riding a 9-game point streak. So Baudouin and Patterson getting it done. And that game against the Saginaw Spirit was so close. They had the 3-2 lead with the final minutes, but penalties catching up with the Barrie Colts. Saginaw would end up tying that game and then winning in overtime. But still, what an amazing effort on the road by the Barrie Colts. And it just seems like they're gelling. And it all starts with players like Thomas Stewart, who's that veteran presence. He's been getting points from the back end for the Barrie Colts. It just seems like this team is hitting its stride at the right point. And right now, seeing that Kingston's in striking distance, the Colts could look to move up the Eastern Conference standings and expect them to also move up in the power rankings if they can continue this momentum. They are playing a rare Monday night game, so they're on the road in Erie tonight to face the Otters. This is a makeup game from a few weeks ago. The game had to be postponed due to ice issues at the Erie Insurance Arena. So the Colts having an extended stay in the United States. They were down in Erie yesterday getting some ice time and getting ready to try and get another win on the road. It would be their 5th if they can do it. They do play in Mississauga Friday night. That'll be the very last trip for the Barrie Colts to the Paramount Fine Food Center. I will be in attendance for that game, doing a bit of a recap. And then they host the Kingston Frontenacs on Saturday. So that one could be a big game. And the Barrie Colts, if they can get some points here this week and Kingston continues to struggle, we could be looking at the Barrie Colts in 7th spot in the East by the end of the weekend. At number 17, it's the Niagara Ice Dogs. They are up 3 positions. even though Niagara sits at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, they don't play like it, especially this last week. They went 2-0-1 in that game against the Sudbury Wolves. They nearly pulled it off. They almost went 3-0 as Niagara is still looking to be competitive. This is a young team that's trying to figure things out going forward. I know that we've had a lot of questions about this Niagara team when it comes to chemistry with the amount of trades they've made, but Kevin he's been a lot of fun to follow with Niagara. Last week, 3 goals, 3 assists, good for 6 points in the 3 games. While Ryan Robrick, he earned his first career hat trick in the win against the North Bay Battalion. So Niagara, yes, they're at the bottom of the standings, but they're making things interesting. They're trying to catch the Peterborough Petes, and right now, 6 points behind the Barrie Colts for that final playoff spot. So things are still possible for Niagara. So it's nice to see the Ice Dogs being competitive there at the Meridian Center. They play a 3-3 on the road this weekend, so it's going to be tough. They're in North Bay, Sudbury, and Sault Ste. Marie. So that's never an easy road trip. At number 16, the Kingston Frontenacs. No change for them from last week. Kingston, they were 1-1, and they continue to play some pretty average hockey right now. They're 4-6 over the last 10 games, but Matthew Soto, I felt like he had a really good game in the win against the Peterborough Petes. He had 2 goals and an assist, extending his point streak to 4 games, so good work there from Matthew Soto. Kingston, they do have a very busy week ahead of them. 4 games starting tomorrow in Oshawa. So that's the last couple meetings between the Frontenacs and the Generals have been pretty spicy, and we'll see if that continues tomorrow at the Tribute Community Center. And then they host Kitchener Friday before traveling to Barrie and North Bay. So some tough competition for Kingston coming up with 4 games this week. They're the busiest team in the Ontario Hockey League this week. At number 15, the Windsor Spitfires. No change for them as well. With the way Windsor has been playing, we'll can probably see them slip a little more in the power rankings. They might catch up to Peterborough at some point because Windsor and Peterborough, I think, are both 2 teams looking to the future. So players looking for just to show what they're capable of going into next season. They were 0-2-1 last week. They've also lost the services of Owen Outwater, who is out for the rest of the season. And of course, Pasquale Zito also leaving the team. So this leaves Windsor shorthanded. So we'll see what Windsor is capable of. They're now 10 points out of a playoff spot. So it's right now tough going right now for the Windsor Spitfires. So we'll see what they're capable of these next few weeks. Windsor, they play a 3-3 this week. They host Erie on Thursday before traveling to London, and then they host Owen Sound. At number 14, falling 3 spots, the Guelph Storm. Guelph, they went 0-2-1 last week. And that overtime loss was against Kitchener, who've also been struggling of late. Guelph now, they've lost 4 in a row, and they're the lowest scoring team in the Western Conference, 143 goals for. Braden Gillespie, he continues to be counted upon with the Guelph Storm in the crease, and we'll just see if they can figure it out. They need to get that offense going if they're going to be competitive in that very tough Western Conference. They're right now in the middle of the pack in the West, so we'll see if they can fend off Owen Sound and Erie, but they need to snap this losing streak. They do have a bit of a challenging week, just 2 games though. First at home against Brantford, and then they travel to Sarnia to face the Sting. At number 13, the Flint Firebirds, they fell 1 position. It's been a slow and steady decline for the Firebirds. They went 0-1-1, although they forced overtime against Ottawa on Saturday, so that was a decent effort there from Flint. They've kind of been falling steadily. They're now 1 point behind Sarnia for that final playoff spot in the Western Conference standings, although they do have 2 games in hand on Sarnia. So you have to win those games to make up ground, but still, that is an encouraging factor if you're a fan of the Flint Firebirds. They've been getting some good contributions, though, from Nolan Dan. He's been a bright spot for this Flint Firebirds team. Points in 16 of his last 17 games. So Nolan Dan getting it done for the Firebirds. And for Flint, they play at home Wednesday against London before traveling to Oshawa and Brantford. So a very tough week as they're facing some top opponents in the Ontario Hockey League coming up this week. At number 12, it's the Mississauga Steelheads. They are up 2 positions. It was an up and down kind of week for Mississauga as they traveled across Northern Ontario. They went 1-2, a big win in Sault Ste. Marie against the Greyhounds. And then when they were in Sudbury to wrap up the road trip, they had that lead 2-1 after the first period, but couldn't hold on to it. It was 3-3 going into the third, and then Sudbury ends up winning 6-3. So this is a very young Mississauga team, still trying to figure it out. But I think this team could still be competitive. I did that interview with Steelheads owner Elliot Kerr yesterday. You can check the video on the channel talking about the relocation to Brampton, but he also started talking about the future of the Steelheads team, the young talent, and we're seeing it. Also to note, Lucas Carmiris, he had a fantastic game in the Sioux, put up 4 assists in that game. So Carmiris, great job for him in that one. And then Ryerson Leanders, he's got that 912 save percentage. That's second best in the OHL. So this Steelheads team, don't count them out. They're going to be a tough opponent in the playoffs. For Mississauga, they're in Peterborough on Thursday before hosting Barrie Friday, and then Sudbury on Sunday. At number 11, it's the Owen Sound Attack. They're up 2 spots this week. They won a back-and-forth game in overtime against the Barrie Colts. Barrie had a sizable lead, and then Owen Sound came back, had a 2-goal lead in the third period, and then gave it up in the final minutes before winning in overtime. So very back and forth. And then they couldn't hold off the London Knights as they lost in a shootout in that one. It's just a lot of back and forth right now with Owen Sound. 4 of their last 6 games have now gone into extra time. So they're getting those extra points to stay competitive, but you want to see that team have that finish. They've got the talent, Colby Barlow, Denny Gore, Cedric Gandon. They can do it. It's just, I don't know, something just seems to be a little off when it comes to keeping pucks out of the back of the net. So home ice advantage seemed a little out of reach at this point. I know there's still 6 weeks to go in the regular season, but they will be a playoff team. They're 9 points ahead of Flint right now, who are sitting in 9th. The Attack, they host Sarnia on Wednesday before traveling to Saginaw and Windsor. At number 10, the Erie Otters, no change for them. It was a decent week for Erie. They went 2-1. That includes a big 6-1 victory at home against the Kitchener Rangers. Ben Goudreau, he remains out of the lineup for the Erie Otters due to injury. He last saw action January 21st when the Otters were in Sault Ste. Marie. He left the game after the first period, and he hasn't been back since. So Jacob Gibbons, he's filled in, and he did a pretty good job there in that win against Kitchener, making 25 saves on 26 shots. So Gibbons getting things done, and we'll have to see how it plays out for the Erie Otters. They also have Charlie Burns, who's been called up, the young goaltender. He's looking very promising for Erie going forward. So I like the makeup of this team going into next season. They should be a threat in the Western Conference. But right now, determined to make the playoffs. They want to snap that playoff drought from 2017, and right now they look like they're on track. So Erie, they do host the Barrie Colts tonight for the makeup game before playing a 3-3 on the road against Windsor, Sarnia, and Saginaw. At number 9, it's the Ottawa 67s. No change for them. The 67s, they're getting points. They went 1-0-1-1 on their road trip through the West Division, and all of their games, they went into extra time, including the overtime win against the Flint Firebirds, where Luca Pinelli was the hero. Pinelli, he is heating up, which is a good sign for Ottawa. He's now up to 34 goals on the season, which is 3rd in the OHL. And he's also 4 goals in his last 2 games and riding a 7-game point streak. So for Ottawa, they kind of slipped a little bit, but with Pinelli starting to pick things up, it seems like the players are starting to gel, and that's a good sign for Ottawa fans. And that East Division, wide open. You've got Ottawa, Brantford, and Oshawa all in contention for top spot in the East Division, and it's going to be a lot of fun to see how it goes over the stretch. Because Ottawa, they're on a 7-game point streak, and they find themselves 4 points behind Oshawa for first place in the division. Ottawa, they do play 2 games at home this week. They're against Peterborough and Kitchener. At number 8, the Kitchener Rangers down another 2 spots this week. This is actually the lowest Kitchener has been in the power rankings all season. They went 1-2 last week, 2 ugly losses, 4-0 at home to London, and a 6-1 loss on the road in Erie. But they did manage that overtime win against the Guelph Storm, where Matthew Sopp was the hero. But other than that, the injuries, I think, are a real problem right now for the Kitchener Rangers. They have been in a tough stretch. They're 4-6 over their last 10 games. It's just not, the bounces aren't going their way right now. So for Kitchener, I'm sure they're going to turn it around. They've got some great talent. But it's just been a tough go. It's not going to get any easier for Kitchener. They're on the road this weekend with stops in Kingston and Ottawa. At number 7, it's the Sudbury Wolves. No change for them. Sudbury, they have the talent, but they're still looking for consistency and discipline. The Wolves, they went 2-1 last week, but they had to come back in both of those wins against Niagara and Mississauga. If they continue to play like this in the playoffs, where they're playing from behind and wanting to come back, it's going to catch up to them. And with playoff hockey, you typically see better defense, better goaltending. So if they fall behind in a game like they did against Mississauga, it's going to be tough sledding for them. And for Sudbury, they need to figure out a way to solve these issues because they can score in bunches. It's just they're not there at the start of the game. Like on the game against Mississauga, they were down 2-1 after the first period. So something has to give with this Wolves team. They have the talent, like I said. Also, they've lost the services of Andre Anania. He was suspended for an open ice hit, so he'll serve 4 games for that. That was against the Niagara Ice Dogs. There's been so many suspensions against this Sudbury Wolves team that it's just discipline's a factor. It's that consistency, and I don't know. It's been so up in the air with the Sudbury Wolves team. We know they've got the scoring. They're a threat offensively, but in the back end, it just continues to be soft. So we'll have to wait and see what Sudbury can do over these next 6 weeks. But they are playing the Sioux Greyhounds on Wednesday. That's going to be at the Sudbury Community Arena. That's going to be a tough one. And then they play home against the Niagara Ice Dogs on Friday before going to Mississauga on Sunday. At number 6, the Brantford Bulldogs, they fell one position. The Bulldogs, they had the lead in the East Division, but that's now disappeared after winning 1-2 last week, including an 8-3 loss to the Oshawa Generals. They now find themselves tied with the Generals with 58 points for first in the division, but Oshawa has the tiebreaker. They still don't have the services of Nick Lardis, and I think this might be catching up to them. They've lost 3 of their last 4 games. So Brantford kind of having a bit of a speed wobble right now. We'll see if they can correct it. The Bulldogs, they play a 3-3 starting Friday in Guelph before hosting Flint and Peterborough. At number 5, the North Bay Battalion. They are up 3 spots. The Battalion, they are a solid team in the Central Division. Niagara, though, they've been giving them fits. Niagara winning 6-4 to wrap up the weekend after North Bay won the first 2 games. So now Niagara has won 2 in a row against the North Bay Battalion. So there's just some teams that get the better of you. And right now it seems like Niagara is getting the best of North Bay. But outside of that, Anthony Romani, he has been outstanding with this North Bay team. Leads the league in points now with 78. 42 goals on the season, which is also first. So great job, Anthony Romani. The Battalion, they play 2 at home this weekend against Niagara and Kingston. So we'll see if the North Bay Battalion can snap that 2-game losing streak against the Niagara Ice Dogs. At number 4, it's the Sioux Greyhounds. They fell one position this week. The Sioux, they got a big 5-3 win on the road against Saginaw where they had to come from behind, but then lost 6-3 to Mississauga. So a good game and then a game that got away from them. For the Greyhounds, they're in the thick of it. They find themselves 2 points behind Saginaw for first in the division, and they have 7 wins over their last 10 games. So Sault Ste. Marie, a very strong team, and Gavin Hayes, he's been a great fit for the Sioux Greyhounds after being acquired from the Flint Firebirds. In 9 games, Hayes has 9 goals, 8 assists, good for 17 points. So I think for the Greyhounds, they have to be happy with what they're seeing from Gavin Hayes. He seems to be enjoying his time with the Sioux, and we'll see if that can continue here in the final stretch. This week, the Greyhounds travel to Sudbury before hosting Niagara and Saginaw. So another big showdown in the West Division between the Greyhounds and the Spirit. At number 3, the Oshawa Generals, they are up one position. It was another perfect week for Oshawa. They went 3-0, and that includes that 8-3 win over Brantford, which moved them into first in the division. This team, they're just clicking. Stuart Rolov's riding a 14-game point streak. You have Matthew Buckley. He's crushing his totals from last season. He's now reached 25 goals on the year after he only had 8 last season and 9 in his rookie year. And then you got Dylan Robrick. He had 6 assists in the 3 games last week. So Oshawa continuing to get it done. The Generals, they do host Kingston tomorrow night before taking on the Flint Firebirds and then ending the week with a huge test against the London Knights. That's going to be on Sunday. At number 2, the Saginaw Spirit. No change for them from last week. Saginaw, they find themselves second in the power rankings now for the 3rd week in a row. The week started shaky with that 5-3 loss at home to the Sioux Greyhounds, and then they needed to come back in overtime in both games against Barrie and Ottawa. So a little shaky for Saginaw, but they've got the depth and they've got the talent, and they're able to overcome right now. Mateusz Sapovalev, he was the overtime hero in both of those games against the Colts and the 67s. The Spirit, they've won 9 of their last 10 games, and their 2 losses have been against the Sioux and London. So those are the 2 top teams that they're competing with right now in the Western Conference. So it just goes to show how tight the West is and how much the power is in the West right now, and Saginaw included in that. So the Spirit, they play a 3-3 this weekend, starting at home against Owen Sound and Erie before heading up to Sault Ste. Marie. At number one, no surprise really, it's the London Knights again. It just seems like the Knights won't be slowing down anytime soon. They have now earned points in 20 consecutive games, which is unreal. London, they played 4 games last week and won all 4. Although they needed a shootout in the win against the Owen Sound Attack, there was also an issue in that game with one of the doors at the Bayshore Community Center, and I've been seeing hashtag Doorgate. But still, London able to overcome despite Owen Sound having a lead in that hockey game. So the Knights, they can battle and play different styles of hockey, and they get it done. So other than that, this is a team that just continues to get it done. And I'm actually going to do a video this week looking at this 20-game point streak that the London Knights had. I did that 10-game winning streak video where I broke down the totals, and I think I'm going to have to do it again, just looking at what this team is doing. It's been impressive, and that's why they remain first in the power rankings now for the 5th week in a row. Looking ahead for London, they're in Flint Wednesday night. Then they host Windsor Friday before traveling to Oshawa. So that game, so Oshawa right now tops in the East Division, and you got the top team in the Midwest. So that should be a great showdown in Oshawa between the Knights and the Generals. So let me know in the comments section down below your thoughts on the power rankings. Which teams are surprising you right now? What do you expect going forward, as we're just 6 weeks away from the end of the regular season? It's been going by so fast, and what's been great is the support here on the channel. We're almost at 100 subscribers on the channel. I kind of didn't think we would see 100 subscribers, but I thank you, each and every one of you, for tuning in and making this channel a lot of fun to do. So it's fun to do the play-by-play for the Barrie Colts, and I'm also enjoying this as an extension. So thank you for your support. Remember to hit like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.